All right, everybody, welcome in. It's the Justin Kinner Show here on a Friday. Time to dive into the final show before Super Bowl 51 coming up on Sunday, of course. The Kansas City Chiefs, the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll hear from former Eagle, of course, right here, Keith Byers. He's going to hop on, or we'll have our conversation with him from earlier in the day on Off the Bench coming up around the corner. We'll get his prediction. Will his former team, the Eagles, prevent the Chiefs from three-peating? We're going to find that out coming up this weekend. I want to open up with reaction to the NFL awards show last night. A lot to take away there. Again, a little bit of controversy, if you will, when it comes to the MVP. We have a new MVP that we'll talk about coming up here in a moment. Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year. The list goes on. And, of course, Comeback Player of the Year. So let's start out with this. The MVP. All right, the most valuable player. The candidates that, I mean, the guys that were up for the MVP award, Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley, no surprise there. Joe Burrow, I thought was a bit of a surprise. I don't think players from non-playoff teams should even be included in anything. You had a good season on a bad team. I don't think Joe Burrow should have even been included in this category whatsoever. Not because I'm a Bengal hater, but I would say that about anybody. But I mean, you look at Josh Allen, who played on a Super Bowl contender. Saquon Barkley is on the team that's in the Super Bowl. Jared Goff played on a team that was the favorite to get to the Super Bowl out of the NFC. Lamar Jackson plays on a Super Bowl contender. All those guys deserve to be in the MVP discussion. Joe Burrow did not, in my opinion. But those were your MVP candidates: Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley, Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, and Lamar Jackson. From a statistical standpoint, Lamar Jackson absolutely crushed what he did last year to win his second MVP award. And many thought that what he did this season was good enough. And by the way, statistically better than the guy that actually won the MVP. But everyone thought that he was a shoo-in, Lamar Jackson, to win his third MVP, back-to-back MVPs for the Ravens this season. That's not the case. Josh Allen came away with it. Josh Allen wins his very first Most Valuable Player award. And I think that creates a very interesting dynamic when you look at everything, because of the fact that everyone is screaming about the fact, well, stats this, stats that. Stats play a major role in this. But we also ignored the stats of Baker Mayfield, who statistically, from a passer standpoint, was a better passing quarterback than some of the guys that were in this list. Jared Goff was an MVP finalist. Baker Mayfield was significantly better than him. Baker wasn't an MVP candidate. Sam Darnold put up significantly better numbers than Jared Goff and even Josh Allen, if you want to be honest. And he wasn't even invited and wasn't even considered an MVP finalist for this. So with all due respect, the people that want to bring up the stats, you can miss me with the stats, because statistically that gets you into the conversation. It's going to be the splitting of hairs as far as what, digging through the weeds to separate everybody else. I have always been a do more with less guy. I think what Josh Allen did this year, of course, I mean, it's all about perspective and context too. Well, Lamar's numbers are better. Well, look at who Lamar is playing with. Look at that offensive line. Look at the run game. He has very good wide receivers. Okay. Are they elite wide receivers? Are they, is it the weapons that Joe Burrow has by any means? No. But they're very good pass catchers. Lamar's not throwing for all the yards that he does if he doesn't have capable pass catchers. Josh Allen's passing stats were not as good. They had to rely on the run game. But Josh Allen didn't turn the ball over, was one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the NFL, played well above expectations. Talking about the Buffalo Bills, of course, they won the division. He was lights out. He had one all-pro player on his roster. Lamar had 7. I have always been a do more with less guy, and Josh Allen, damn it, did more with absolutely less. As I've stated before, you have Joe Burrow, who is screaming for anyone to hear him, I need T. Higgins. I need Jamar Chase. And here's Josh Allen winning an MVP with no one that even remotely resembles T. Higgins or Jamar Chase. Like, what are we doing here? Like, Lamar Jackson, fantastic. By the way, had Lamar won, I would have been fine with that. Lamar winning MVP, I would have been completely fine with him winning the MVP. It's not a big deal. I thought it was going to come down to either of those two. And that's kind of where we're at right now. But congratulations, Josh Allen, winning his very first career MVP nonetheless. So something to keep in mind, too, how the MVP works with the voting process. There are 50 voters for the MVP award, okay? So what ends up happening is these 50 voters, they submit their ballot, and the 5 names that we talked about, obviously, I don't even think it's just down to those 5 names, but they submit 5 names. And the first name, again, you rank them first to fifth. A first place name gets 10 points, second place 5 points, third place 3 points, fourth place 2 points, and fifth place is 1 point. 50 voters got to rank their MVP choices from 1 to 5 with that scoring system. Now, the AP then takes everyone's ballot, and then they go and score it all, and that's how they determine who the MVP is. I thought there was a lot of interesting takeaways in there. Obviously, it was just by a few points, but Josh Allen outbeats Lamar Jackson to win his first MVP. But as far as the Cincinnati Bengals are concerned within the MVP conversation, as I said earlier, Joe Burrow should not have even been in the MVP conversation. I'm not saying he didn't have a great year, but you had a great year on a non-playoff team. That's not good enough. You shouldn't be in the conversation. I think that most valuable, where would the Bengals be without Joe Burrow? Well, where were the Bengals with Joe Burrow? They were at home watching the good teams participate in the playoffs. That's not an indictment on Joe Burrow, but that is the repercussions of playing for the Cincinnati Bengals at this point. There's a reason why he's been so desperate, screaming on all these shows, help me, keep T. Higgins, get Jamar Chase taken care of. Don't let Trey Hendrickson go. Oh, now Mike G, by the way. Mike G is Mike Gesicki. We got to get him paid. Got to get him taken care of, which, by the way, I agree with him. All these guys need to be taken care of. But the panic of Joe Burrow is very evident in regards to how he's handling this media tour. But as far as Joe Burrow is concerned, when it comes to the MVP voting, Joe Burrow got 15 third-place votes. He got 9 fourth-place votes, and he got 12 fifth-place votes. Joe Burrow actually showed up on 39 of the 50 ballots. That's a lot of ballots that he showed up on the MVP. But 11 voters felt like I did. Joe Burrow, you're beyond talented. You're going to win an MVP at some point. He's going to win one, probably going to be next year, okay? Probably going to win the MVP award next season. But 11 voters felt as I did that, hey, you're not in the playoffs. You're not on a playoff team. You're not in the MVP discussion. And I agreed with them. So 39 of the 50 ballots had Joe Burrow on there. 11 voters did not even cast a single vote for Joe Burrow. Ironically enough, and by the way, here's some of the names that left Joe Burrow off their ballot. Okay. Emmanuel Acho, Teddy Bruschi, Tony Dungy. I thought it was a significant name. And one name that surprised me that left Joe Burrow off of his ballot was Dan Orlovsky. Dan Orlovsky has been a big Joe Burrow defender all season. But Dan Orlovsky, eloquently put out there that, hey, he believes that quarterbacks who are not on playoff teams do not get his vote, and star players who are on, non-playoff teams do not get, his vote. So that's his policy for his vote. It's his vote. And if that's how he wants to run it out, then so be it. But I thought I agree with Dan Orlovsky as far as keeping Joe Burrow off of that. But Joe Burrow wasn't the only Cincinnati Bengal that was getting MVP votes. How about this? Jamar Chase, of the 50 voters for MVP, 4 of the voters had Jamar Chase on the ballot. I thought this was interesting. 4 of the 50 voters did include Jamar Chase on their ballot. Those names, Tom Brady and Teddy Bruschi, Chris Sims and Charles Robinson. Now, Teddy Bruschi, the interesting thing about Teddy Bruschi is the fact that he had Jamar Chase as an MVP finalist for his vote, but no Joe Burrow. You had Jamar Chase on your top 5 MVP votes, but you didn't include the guy that was throwing him the football. I thought that was very interesting. Tom Brady had Joe Burrow on his MVP ballot, but he had Jamar Chase on that ballot as well, but he had Jamar Chase ranked ahead of Joe Burrow. As far as that's concerned, the greatest of all time, Tom Brady, ranking Jamar Chase, the Triple Crown winner this season, ahead of Joe Burrow on his ballot. I just thought that was just some interesting notes as we kind of dive in to the MVP results from last night. Justin Kinner with you here. It's the Justin Kinner Show on 1410 ESPN Radio. Happy Friday. Got the Super Bowl coming up on Sunday. We'll turn our attention there coming up here in a moment. But just kind of reacting to the NFL awards show last night and the NFL awards that had come out. Offensive Player of the Year, candidates for this, the nominees for this, if that's what you to call it, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, Saquon Barkley. I think without a shadow of a doubt, those 5 players are the 5 most electric offensive players in football. I thought that was interesting. What I do find interesting is that the top 5 candidates for Offensive Player of the Year, None of them are the MVP and Josh Allen. I see people's takeaway there that, that Lamar Jackson was good enough to be in the finalist for Offensive Player of the Year, but wasn't the MVP. And Josh Allen, who wasn't good enough for Offensive Player of the Year award, won the MVP. I get it, and that's what people are getting hung up on. Saquon Barkley, though, the star running back for the Eagles, who we'll get to watch on Sunday, walked away with the Offensive Player of the Year award. So I think that's pretty cool. Defensive Player of the Year, Zach Bond, linebacker, Philadelphia Eagles, Myles Garrett for the Browns, Trey Hendrickson for the Cincinnati Bengals, TJ Watt for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then Patrick Surtain, again, the cornerback for the Broncos. I think TJ Watt and Myles Garrett are there in the conversation every year. Trey Hendrickson has put together back-to-back dominating seasons. I mean, Trey Hendrickson has actually put himself in the conversation with Myles Garrett and TJ Watt as far as, being one of the most dominant, probably the top 3 most dominant pass rushers in football, right? Like, Trey Hendrickson has just been that great. Bengals fans are upset that Trey Hendrickson did not come away with that award. And I got to tell you, I don't know why you think he deserved to come away with that award. I think he's as good. I know, first of all, I will not ever take him over Myles Garrett or TJ Watt, but I think he's right up. I think he's embarking on that, to be fair. But Trey Hendrickson is a dominant pass rusher on one of the worst defenses in the National Football League. There's a reason that the Bengals did not make the playoffs. And it wasn't because of Joe Burrow, but it was because of that defense. You can't be the best player on the worst side of the ball on one of the worst sides of the ball in the National Football League. You just can't. You're not going to be rewarded for that. I think being a finalist for it was enough respect considering the circumstances. I think Trey Hendrickson's fantastic, and I do believe that based on this season, if the Cincinnati Bengals make the playoffs, if they win 2 more games throughout the regular season, I believe Trey Hendrickson probably comes away with Defensive Player of the Year. Myles Garrett was as good this season as last season. What's the difference? Oh, yeah, the Browns missed the playoffs. They have the number 2 pick in the draft. They only won 3 games. Myles Garrett is as good this year as he was last year. Why didn't he win Defensive Player of the Year again? I think he should have, but he didn't. And why? It's because the Browns weren't a playoff team. When you're a dominant elite player on a bad team, you are not going to get those awards. I don't know why so many Bengals fans are upset that Trey Hendrickson didn't win it, that Joe Burrow didn't win MVP. That Jamar Chase, didn't win Offensive Player of the Year. Jamar Chase was one of the most electric offensive players in the National Football League on a bad team. Joe Burrow put up one of the most historic seasons a quarterback has ever put up on a bad team. Trey Hendrickson was one of the most dominating pass rushers in football this season on a bad team. I've heard it all. I've heard that there's that people just don't like the Bengals. People just don't like losing teams. The Browns made the playoffs last year. Myles Garrett was Defensive Player of the Year. Browns missed the playoffs this year. Same statistical season as last year, pretty much. Didn't win Defensive Player of the Year. Patrick Surtain II was a great dominant shutdown corner on one of the best defenses in the National Football League, and not just one of the best defenses in the National Football League, on a playoff team. I have no problem with Patrick Surtain II coming away with the Defensive Player of the Year award. Moving on, Offensive Rookie of the Year, no surprise. Brock Bowers, I'm a huge fan of. If Jaden Daniels just didn't have the beyond insane caliber season that he has had, I would have a problem with it. But Malik Neighbors was up for it. Bo Nix and Brian Thomas Jr., star wide receiver for the Jaguars. But I think this was an easy one. I think it was a 2-man race between Jaden Daniels and Brock Bowers. Jaden Daniels came away with the Offensive Rookie of the Year award. Defensive Rookie of the Year, Jared Verse, outside linebacker, of course, for the Rams. Chop Robinson, Kenyon Mitchell, Braden Fisk, and Cooper DeJean, all up for that award for Defensive Rookie of the Year. But Jared Verse, no doubt, deserves that award. Comeback Player of the Year. Here's where Joe Burrow and the Bengals come away with an award. Joe Burrow named the Comeback Player of the Year. He kind of joked a little bit that, he's happy to win the award, but he wishes he wasn't up for the award. But other players that were up for that award, J.K. Dobbins, Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback for the Patriots, Damar Hamlin with the Bills, and Sam Darnold, the quarterback with the Minnesota Vikings. I don't understand this award, to be honest. Joe Flacco won it last year for Cleveland, and I just don't understand the purpose of it. I think Comeback Player of the Year is kind of a dumb award. I have no clue the purpose of it. I think Joe Burrow thought it was kind of silly too. You can kind of hear the tone in his voice as he's giving the speech. Like, he's trying to be respectful to the league and respectful to the award, but I don't know what Joe Burrow necessarily won. Comeback Player of the Year. That doesn't mean anything. And that's not a shot at Burrow. Like I said it last year when Flacco won it. It doesn't mean anything. I mean, the fact that, DeMar Hamlin was up for comeback player of the year last year when he barely played at all was just insane to me. That just ruined the credibility of the award. I wasn't a fan of it. Assistant coach of the year, Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, now the head coach of the Chicago Bears. No surprise there. And then the coach of the year, Dan Campbell was up for this award, as well as Sean Payton with the Broncos, Dan Quinn with the Commanders, Andy Reid with the Chiefs. Look, Andy Reid should get this every year, but it's not how it works. This is a storyline-driven award. I think of all the awards, the coach of the year and MVP are the two storyline driven awards more than anything else. Coach of the year is the most storyline driven award. And that's why Kevin O'Connell with the Minnesota Vikings came away with this one. The Vikings, they drafted quarterback in the top 10. That was supposed to be their guy. JJ McCarthy out for the season. Sam Darnold. A lot of people thought they were crazy for rolling with Sam Darnold and not trying to make a trade to enhance their quarterback room. And Sam Darnold goes on to what should have been an MVP caliber season. The guy should have been a finalist for MVP. He should have been a finalist over Joe Burrow. It's not even close. He was an elite quarterback on a good playoff team. Joe Burrow was not. I can't emphasize that enough. Joe Burrow should not have been a finalist for MVP. I'll just continue saying that over and over and over. But Kevin O'Connell coming away with Coach of the Year. Andy Reid should win that every year, but that's not how this works. It's a storyline-driven league. Dan Quinn for the Commanders. Here's who I thought really should have won it. Kevin O'Connell, I'm not against, because again, the Vikings played well above and beyond expectations. Okay. But I think Sean Payton deserves a lot of credit too. And that division with the rookie quarterback, Sam Darnold's been around the league a lot. It's not like he was an inexperienced quarterback. Sean Payton drafted a rookie quarterback. They barely had any cap space. All right. They traded away their second best wide receiver in Jerry Jeudy and goes on to win a lot and make the playoffs and have one of the best defenses in the league. I'm a Sean Payton guy. I think he should have came away with it, but I'm fine with Kevin O'Connell coming away with it when it's all said and done. All right, I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show right here on 1410 ESPN Radio. I'm curious your guys' thoughts. Head to the Justin Kinner Show on Facebook and leave your opinions in the comment section. I'll pull some of those comments in and react. What do you think? Again, Joe Burrow, when it comes to the MVP, he was on 39 of the 50 ballots. 11 voters did not vote for Joe Burrow for MVP. He got 15 third-place votes, 9 fourth-place votes, and 12 fifth-place votes. No first- or second-place votes for the Bengals quarterback. Some of the notable voters that did not vote for Joe Burrow for MVP: Emmanuel Acho, Teddy Bruschi, Tony Dungy, and Dan Orlovsky. As far as that's concerned, Jamar Chase also getting votes for the Cincinnati Bengals. He was on 4 of the 50 ballots. Tom Brady voted for Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, but he had Jamar Chase ranked ahead of Joe Burrow on his ballot. Teddy Bruschi, interestingly enough, had Jamar Chase on his ballot, but no Joe Burrow. Interesting. Chris Sims and Charles Robinson were the other voters for Jamar Chase for MVP. But that goes to Josh Allen. How does that impact Joe Burrow's legacy? We'll talk about that more when we come back. Also, we'll talk all things Super Bowl 51 or coming up here around the corner. Justin Kinner with you here, Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM. We'll be right back. All right, and we welcome you back. It's the Justin Kinner Show here on a Friday. We opened up with reacting to the NFL Awards show last night. Josh Allen wins his very first career MVP. McConnell, the head coach for the Vikings, comes away with Coach of the Year. Saquon Barkley, he leaves the awards show last night with Offensive Player of the Year. That was one of the deepest categories, to be honest. I don't think MVP was that deep of a cat. We knew it was between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. I don't think that was a very deep conversation. I think that Saquon should have been more in the conversation, but he wasn't. I don't think that the MVP nominees that was a super deep, pool of names to pick from. Interesting. Patrick Surtain II again coming away with Defensive Player of the Year. Good for him. Congratulations to him. He's a lockdown corner. Very good player for the Broncos. At one point thought about moving on from him, to go into this big rebuild, but they moved on from all the pieces on the offensive side of the ball, and they drafted really well to kind of fix some of those holes nonetheless. But Patrick Surtain wins Defensive Player of the Year over Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, and Trey Hendrickson, along with Zach Bond, the linebacker for the Eagles. Jaden Daniels wins Offensive Rookie of the Year, as we talked about. Joe Burrow wins Comeback Player of the Year. And then Jared Verse, star pass rusher for the Rams, wins Offensive Defensive Player of the Year. But I said a little bit ago, earlier in the week, we did this topic of, okay, if you are Joe Burrow, who are you going for? Who are you rooting for in the Super Bowl? Who are you rooting for in the Super Bowl? And the reason is because you look at the fact that Jalen Hurts was taken in the same draft as Joe Burrow. Jalen Hurts has won way more games than Joe Burrow. Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow each got to a Super Bowl, both losing their first Super Bowl appearance. And now all of a sudden, Jalen Hurts has a chance to do something on Sunday night that Joe Burrow has not done, and that's win a Super Bowl. And, the other quarterback, when you think about the quarterbacks that Joe Burrow is lumped into, you talk about Lamar Jackson, you talk about Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, right? Like those are the top three names quarterback-wise. Joe Burrow is right there with them. But I think that the reason Joe Burrow is on the top three quarterbacks in the NFL are Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen. They all have the skill set. Joe Burrow has the skill set to be lumped in with them. He doesn't have the hardware to be lumped in with them. And I think that's why you're seeing him become so active in going to the media and pitching the team to do what's right and to get these star players taken care of so that they could just start focusing on going back to competing in the playoffs and for Super Bowls. Right now, they're just competing to keep their roster intact. I think you're seeing the urgency for Joe Burrow from an individual standpoint start to pick up because he's seeing separation now occur across the league. Josh Allen, for a minute there, it was those four: Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. I now no longer put Joe Burrow in the conversation with those guys because all of those guys have the skill set just like Burrow does, but all of those guys have hardware. All of those guys don't miss the playoffs. All of those guys win a lot of football games. Joe Burrow has won 6 more games than he has lost during his NFL career. Joe Burrow has missed the playoffs 3 times. Joe Burrow has no MVP. Josh Allen now has an MVP. Patrick Mahomes has all the MVPs and all the Super Bowls and has a chance to add a 4th one to his trophy to his mantle on Sunday. He's a Super Bowl MVP. You look at Lamar Jackson in his own division. He has 2 MVPs. There is now separation that is beginning to form throughout the NFL. What you don't want if you are Joe Burrow when you look ahead to Sunday night is you don't want another quarterback to start creating separation. And I know a lot of people aren't going to give Jalen Hurts a lot of credit. He has not been a dominant passing quarterback this season. The last time we saw Jalen Hurts play at a level that I was like, oh my God, he's right up there with the best of the best. He outperformed Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. He threw for more yards, completed more passes, had more touchdowns. He was the better quarterback in that Super Bowl. We haven't seen him return to that form. Now, the style of play has been a little bit different because you have Saquon Barkley. I would expect better numbers from Jalen Hurts because of the fact that you have Devontae Smith and you have A.J. Brown. There's a reason A.J. Brown has kind of been unhappy throughout the season, mainly because of the fact that he's in a tough spot. Statistically, he should be so much better, but he's not because of the limitations of the offense or maybe the limitations of the quarterback. But I still think Jalen Hurts is a hell of a quarterback, and I think he's going to have a big game on Sunday against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. But I think if you're Joe Burrow sitting back trying to figure out who you're rooting for in this game, if Patrick Mahomes wins another Super Bowl, the gap between him and Burrow is so wide that you're not closing that gap if you're Burrow. So I don't think he's worried about that. I do think that if Jalen Hurts, a guy that was taken in the same draft as him, accomplishes something he hasn't, that is just one more up-and-coming quarterback in this league that has something he doesn't have. Josh Allen has an MVP that he doesn't. Lamar Jackson has 2 MVPs. He doesn't have one. Patrick Mahomes has all the Super Bowls and the Super Bowl MVPs and the MVPs. Joe Burrow doesn't have any of that. And if Jalen Hurts wins a Super Bowl, that's now one more quarterback in this league that is propped up, that would have something that he doesn't. I think he would be pulling for the Chiefs this coming up week. But I do think the significance of Josh Allen winning that MVP last night, I think that it has created a pocket of quarterbacks in the league. I think the top 3 quarterbacks, Josh Allen, in no particular order, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. Those are the top 3 quarterbacks. I put them up in a tier all on their own. And then underneath would be Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, the separation has now started to truly form because the hardware is now separated those 3 from him. So that's kind of how I sit with that as we currently sit here and evaluate the situation. But that's why it's going to be very important for what the Bengals do this offseason, because I think you're starting to see the panic sit in for Joe Burrow. And it's not panic in a bad way. It's just that competitive drive. He's looking around. He's watching what Josh Allen's doing. He's watching what Lamar's doing and watching Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl again. And now he's watching Jalen Hurts, a star quarterback that was taken in the same draft as him, play in his second Super Bowl and has a chance to win his first. Yeah. I think that's something that's definitely on the mind of Mr. Joey B at the end of the day. All right, I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show right here on 1410 ESPN Radio. We'll talk a little college basketball coming up here around the corner as well. Dayton Flyers is going to be in action tonight. Wright State has their homecoming game tomorrow. The Cincinnati Bearcats put 90 up the other night against UCF. We'll see if they can keep that run going. A lot of people are still putting Cincinnati as a potential at-large team. I mean, they've been pretty rough this season, but they might be picking it up here. We'll see what they do against BYU on Saturday. Xavier is going to be in action. We're going to talk about all that coming up here in a moment. All right, I'm Justin Kinner. Again, it's the Justin Kinner Show right here on 1410 ESPN Radio. Super Bowl coming up on Sunday, and that's going to be a 6:30 kickoff, of course, on Fox. I do want to say this. Kev Nash and I were going to be live at Hollywood Gaming this Sunday from 4 to 6. The sports book is the sports bar that's inside Hollywood Gaming. We're going to be set up in there. We're going to be giving away a ton of ESPN prizes. You're going to come up. You're going to show proof that you have the ESPN Bet app on your phone, and we're going to talk about all the prop bets. We're going to talk about all of our favorite bets to place throughout the Super Bowl in 4 to 6 p.m. on Sunday leading into that. So we do want to see you. Come on out, hang out with us, Hollywood Gaming inside the sports book. And we'll be, and again, that's the sports bar that's in there, and hang out with us as we get you set for the Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the Eagles this Sunday. I will say my favorite, we talked about this on Off the Bench earlier. My favorite bet to always place, I don't know if you guys have, you follow this one, but it's both teams to score a touchdown and a field goal in both halves. I always feel like that's one of the more easier attainable bets. And I never seem to have hit on it twice, and it's usually a very good payout. I'm placing that one for Sunday. I'm still looking at others. I think Travis Kelce's going to have a big night. The Eagles really struggle against defending opponents' tight ends. I really do like Travis Kelce to have a big performance coming up this Sunday night against the Eagles. But man, oh man, we'll have more on the Super Bowl later in the show and this Sunday, Hollywood Gaming again. From 4 to 6 p.m. When it's all said and done. Justin Kinner with you here, 1410 ESPN Radio. Let's talk a little college basketball. The Dayton Flyers, they're in the top 25, then they're not. They're on the bubble, and then they're not. Are they back on the bubble? We'll take a look at Joe Lunardi with ESPN. We'll take a look at his latest bracketology report. If the NCAA, if his bracketology report was true, here's the 4 teams we would see at UD Arena and the NCAA first 4. We're getting closer and closer to the first 4, by the way. How about that? But we have all of that coming up. More of the Justin Kinner Show when we come back. All right, and we are back. It's the Justin Kinner Show here on a Friday, Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM. All right, college basketball. What's coming up this weekend? I think the slate of college basketball games coming up. I like Rick Pitino. I think he's doing it's amazing watching what he's doing at St. John's. I know Rick Pitino is linked to a lot of controversial things when it comes to college basketball, of course. Has he always done it the clean way, this, that, and the other? I always argue those who like to throw him under the bus for that. I don't think any program truly does everything 100% by the book. Let's just be clear, okay? Not making excuses for it. That's just the reality of it. And to be honest, he's a legendary figure in the world of college basketball, and we're lucky considering all the big names that have quit on college basketball because of, by the way, I always laugh. We as fans say how much we dislike college sports for what it has become right now. Then we get mad when the coaches don't like it either and get out of the game. Like Rick Pitino has fought through the changes, and he's still dominating even with all the changes that have been implemented over the last couple of years and probably more changes to come. But Rick Pitino and St. John's going to be on the road tonight at UConn. That's an 8:00 kickoff. Rick Pitino against Dan Hurley. That's a huge one over there out of the Big East. We're getting further and further into February. March, it's the shortest month of the year. March is not too far off in the distance. I'm getting that itch for college basketball. So I'm pretty excited about what's to come. With that coming up. And look, we're fortunate that we get the first four here in Dayton every single season. We tip off the NCAA tournament at UD Arena, so I'm excited about that. And we're going to talk more. We'll take a look at ESPN Joe Lenardi's latest bracketology more coming up around the corner. On Saturday, you're going to see John Calipari in Arkansas welcome in number 3 Alabama. All of a sudden, Arkansas, after winning at Rupp a few games ago, they've won back-to-back games, and they, looking to keep that going against the number 3 team in the country. I will say, if Arkansas knocks off the number 3 team in the country, I think Arkansas is one of those teams that all of a sudden it's not how you start, it's how you finish. The SEC, the best conference in college basketball this season. If Arkansas starts to get hot, this is the time of year you want to get hot. Like, we're going to talk about Arkansas and how up and down the season has been for Calipari in his first season over there. But I think right now they're playing their best basketball. And if Arkansas gets hot and they're led by Calipari, they're going to be one of the biggest stories heading into the NCAA tournament here in less than a month. So keep that in mind. That's a team to follow. Nonetheless, speaking of it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Since he put up 90-plus points this past weekend against, I think it was, who was it? Yeah, I can't remember who they played this past weekend. They put up 90 points. They took care of business this past weekend. And now all of a sudden there seems to be a little bit of momentum with the Bearcats. Can they build on that? We'll find out. They're going to host BYU tomorrow night, 6:00 on ESPN2. So that's something to keep an eye on. Look, I thought it was interesting the other day. I don't know if Bob Huggins is ever going to coach again. I know he had a very unceremonious exit due to some insensitive things that were said on 700 WLW a few years ago. He's been out of college basketball, but he's still been spotted at a lot of Bearcat games. In fact, the interesting thing, enough, he spoke to the Bearcats basketball team before they put 90-plus points up against UCF. It finally came to me. My head was, spinning there trying to figure out who they played the other night. UCF. Thank you for that in the chat. But yeah, he went and spoke to the team. They're in a little bit of a drought right now. And Wes Miller, a lot of fans are starting to get very angry, and the chair's starting to heat up for him. But Bob Huggins, the big story was he went and spoke to the Bearcat team wearing Bearcat gear before the game, and all of a sudden that inspired them to go out there. They put 90 points up against UCF. They're playing some good basketball. Will that continue against BYU? That's what we'll find out. But the Huggins thing is interesting. Wes Miller talked about the fact that he was really happy about the fact that Huggins was willing to come and speak to the team. Are you happy, Wes Miller? Are you happy that, I'm sure he is, that they got a win and kind of took the pressure off a bit, but how happy is Wes Miller? Keep in mind, there's a lot of pressure on him. That seat is starting to heat up, and a legendary figure from your program's past just went and spoke to the team, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they put 90 points up. You don't think that he's going to get more credit than Wes Miller for that? Because I could see this being that turning point in the season. Watch Cincinnati take care of business against BYU. That was a quad 1 win, by the way, and their win against, over the weekend against UCF. It's a big win that puts them right back, and not look, they're not in. If the tournament was drawn today, they're not in that large team, but they're trying to boost that resume up a little bit. And that'd be a huge thing for them if they could do that. But this could be one of those where if Cincy gets hot and takes off, we're going to be sitting there circling that game against, when we saw, Bob Huggins come in and speak with the team, we're going to circle that game. We're going to circle it and say, oh yeah, that's the date. UCF, that's the game. That's the date that we saw the program turn around, and it's all going to be linked back to Huggins. And if Cincinnati struggles continue, there's been a lot of chatter. The AD has made some bad hires. Things have not been going well for the athletic director at UC. Satterfield's probably going to coach one more season for the Bearcats before being canned. And Wes Miller, who everyone had high expectations for the Bearcats, top 25 team at one point, all of a sudden lost grip of everything. And it's not just that they're losing, they're playing poor. They played really good the other night. They have BYU coming up. Xavier, Sean Miller's team, they're going to be on the road at Villanova on Sunday. And then Ohio State. How about Ohio State last night? 73-70 the final. Ohio State gets a big win against Maryland. Ohio State, it looks like the drought of the NCAA tournament's going to come to an end. That was a big win last night. Thornton with the game winner. You can't ask for a better finish to that game. They were down 18 at one point and were able to come back. There was multiple times where they were down 6 and then they get down 10 and 12. Every time they'd start to muster a comeback, Maryland just seemed to have a counter, had an answer for everything. Ohio State and Thornton last night, Jake Diebler's Buckeye squad. Joe Lenardi has them sitting as a 9 seed if the NCAA tournament started today, according to his bracketology. So I did find that interesting to keep an eye on Ohio State moving forward. With that, Wright State will be in action tomorrow night. It'll be their homecoming game against IU Indy. Wright State coming off of a very bad loss the other night against Purdue Fort Wayne. They couldn't get shots to fall for anything. They had no answer at the offensive end, and the shots, we'll see if they start falling tomorrow night. They have IU Indy. It's their homecoming game. A lot of homecoming festivities going on throughout campus all weekend. So keep that in mind, but that's a big one tomorrow. So come on out to the Nutter Center for that. Dayton's in action tonight. They welcome in VCU, and then they'll have Fordham next Wednesday. That's their 2 games coming up. Look, that game, I forgot who the Flyers even played the other night, but, I mean, they should have lost that game. The Flyers have had 2 finishes at home this season that are just unbelievable. That pass from Malachi Smith, this time expires a couple games ago when they were able to get that win against Loyola, and then the win the other night. They were trailing, the technical happens, and then all of a sudden, Dayton's rewarded free throws, and they hold on to win the game. They shouldn't have won that game, and they probably shouldn't have beat Loyola, but they have, and good teams find ways to win. They're finding ways to win. Are they winning enough to play themselves back onto the bubble? That's the big question, and I don't know if that's actually the case. I don't know if they've been playing good enough to play themselves onto the bubble. But again, they just have to continue to take care of business. They have to take care of business tonight against VCU. That would be a big one for them if they could pull that off. So keep that in mind. That's coming up later on tonight. The other thing, too, I started to take a look to kind of see how some of the teams around the state of Ohio are doing in college basketball as far as in reference to March Madness coming up. And I think there's going to be a good shot that we see quite a few teams from the state of Ohio in the NCAA tournament coming up. Obviously you have Cincinnati and Xavier and Dayton all trying to position themselves, of course, to get in that large bid for the NCAA tournament. All those teams are going to have a chance to obviously get the auto bid if they can win their conference tournament, but that's something that Dayton hasn't done in decades. So I have no faith that Anthony Grant is going to do that and get that done with his team. I just don't see that happening. I don't know if they're even good enough against the A-10 to be able to play themselves back into the at-large conversation either, but they have a shot. Xavier, they've been the most consistent team out of the 3 that we're talking about here. Cincinnati coming off of a very good win against UCF, as we just mentioned, the Bob Huggins game. We'll see if they can play their way back out there. But if you even look at the Horizon League, Wright State, obviously they're not sitting at the top of the standings, so I'm not going to prop them up too much. But Cleveland State is the team to look out for out of the Horizon League, and Youngstown State's very good. But Cleveland State, I mean, we've heard Clark Kellogg and a lot of the national shows reference Cleveland State. That's a team to circle and keep an eye on. They just had their big winning streak snapped last week against Northern Kentucky, but you could tell fatigue playing a role there. Cleveland State's good. They have the shooters, they have the size, they have the athletes, the slashers. Their coach is really good, and I'd look out for Cleveland State. That's another team out of the state of Ohio to keep an eye on. Here's the deal. Okay, you look at the MAC. You look at the 2 teams sitting atop the MAC, Akron and Miami of Ohio. if you look at the MAC, the top 5 teams in the MAC are all Ohio teams. Teams 1 through 5 are all Ohio teams. A lot of great college basketball being played here in the state of Ohio. Ohio State's going to be in. Obviously, we talked about Xavier, Cincinnati, and Dayton all fighting to get back into the at-large conversation. The MAC is going to, whoever their auto bid is going to be, it's probably going to be the likes of a Miami of Ohio, who's playing great basketball over there under Coach Steele. Obviously, Akron sitting at the top. Toledo's a great program. Cleveland State out of the Horizon League, as I mentioned. Youngstown State's a viable option there, too. And Wright State, you may look at the record and not want to put them in that conversation. I'm telling you right now, I think they've had 8 or 9 games that have come down to the final possession. And they haven't been very, successful in those one possession games, but that's how close they are. If you turn over some of those games, they're sitting right there at the top of, in the mix of things. So I would say Wright State's capable of beating anybody in this conference. And we've seen it, but we got to see it more consistent. If they can find a way to flip that switch, Wright State will have a good chance of coming away in the conference tournament as well. They have the Horizon League preseason player of the year in Brandon Knoll. They have great scorers and shooters like Alex Hubricks, of course. Keaton Norris is a coach and a leader on the floor. I love the athleticism that comes off the bench. They're deep. They have a lot. We'll see it on the floor tomorrow night when they welcome in IU Indy. But that's a big game tomorrow for Wright State as they try to get back in the win column before their Milwaukee trip. They'll have Milwaukee and the Fighting Doug Gottliebs next week, the Green Bay Phoenix. Green Bay, I think, they have 2 wins on the season, no wins in Horizon League play. And, I do got to ask you guys this, too. What do you guys make of, obviously, Radio Row is this week at the Super Bowl. Doug Gottlieb, his team has been atrocious this season, and he took time off to go host his show on Radio Row. He's getting a lot of criticism for that. Look, I've lightly defended Doug Gottlieb from the standpoint of if they gave him permission to host his show and coach, why wouldn't he accept that? Why would he, whatever he's getting paid a lot of money by Fox to be the full-time sports talk show host for them. Why would he just turn that down if he doesn't have to? But this was always the risk of taking over a team when you're a national sports talk show host, is that if it's not going well, even if your show is not why they're losing, we're going to circle it and say, well, you're not fully committed to winning and to your team, so no wonder you've only won 2 games on the year, and you're distracted with doing your radio show. That was always going to be the case. The best case scenario was that they would be at least well above 500, competitive in the conference, not even expecting them to win the conference. But because they are bad, and that happens with first-year coaches, by the way. It's not easy to be a first-year head coach and to put a full roster together the way he's had to do it, not defending him. But, I mean, it's not like the odds were in his favor to get this to work. So this was the worst-case scenario, was that the team be horrible. And I don't think it's because he's a sports talk show host, but that's exactly what people are going to blame every single time and just say, hey, he's distracted. He's not all in. But we'll keep an eye on that situation because I think that's an interesting storyline outside of there as well. All right. We welcome you again. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio. The NCAA tournament, we're getting closer and closer. Of course, we're lucky here. Our partnership with the Big Hoopla, the organizing committee that helps bring the first 4 to Dayton each and every year. We're getting closer and closer. ESPN's Joe Lunardi put out his bracketology report and is kind of listing all the teams that are on the bubble. All right. So if the NCAA tournament, if the bracket was a reflection of his bracket, these are the teams that he has playing in the first 4 at UD Arena: Vanderbilt, San Diego State, BYU, who the Bearcats will play tomorrow, and then Wake Forest. The teams that are just on the outside looking in: Pitt has a chance, North Carolina, VCU, who the Flyers play tonight, and USC. All right. You also have, these are the teams just on the outside looking in as well. You have Xavier, who could, Sean Miller and company could find themselves in the first 4. Arkansas, and of course, John Calipari, who has turned the corner. They've had some big wins over the last week, ever since that win at Rupp. Look out for Arkansas. But Xavier, Arkansas, SMU, and UCF, who the Bearcats just beat, putting up 90 against them just last weekend. But that is something to keep an eye on as we head into the weekend. College basketball starting to heat up, and that's my favorite time of year. We're getting closer and closer to the NCAA tournament. There you go. It's the Justin Kinner Show right here on Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM. If you missed Off the Bench earlier today, we have it coming up next right here on 1410 ESPN Radio. Woo!